Can we agree as midlife women that we dream about the holidays being peaceful, but typically the reality is that they're very stressful, especially if you're the one making sure everyone's happy and that everything's perfect. You have the perfect gifts, they're wrapped, they're under the tree, the menus are planned, and you have the perfect family photo for the card. And all the while you're silently hoping that everything goes smoothly this year. If that sounds familiar, then this video is for you. I'm sharing 5 examples of how the holidays are so much harder for those of us with people-pleasing behaviors, and how understanding these examples will drastically reduce stress and help you find more peace and joy, not only at the holidays, but throughout your life. What if I told you that all your dreaming and striving for a perfect holiday isn't because you want everybody to celebrate and relax and have a good time, but it's actually about something a lot deeper, and that is survival, the need to feel accepted. For people pleasers, the holidays can end up being a test of our value and our worthiness, and let me explain. In yesterday's video, we talked about how expectations, trying to live up to other people's expectations, causes us so much stress. And the labels that we're given and the stories that we tell ourselves about those labels, all of that is stored in the subconscious mind. And the same is true for the need to feel seen and accepted. And during the holidays, we think that if we do enough, that we'll finally get that approval, that appreciation that we're seeking. And if we don't get it, it can be disappointing or even devastating. Trying to gain acceptance and approval is like blowing up a balloon. Every yes that you say, every situation that you try to make perfect, staying quiet to avoid conflict, doing all the things to make life easier for other people, make them happy, that is a puff of air that you're putting into the balloon. And each thing that you do to try and make others' lives better, you are adding more pressure into the balloon. And for a while, it can seem like everything's smooth and peaceful, like it's working, like all your doing and giving is working. But balloons can only stretch so far. And suddenly the balloon pops, it explodes. All your effort to try and keep the balloon inflated with air, with all the things that you're doing, it blows up in your face. The harder we try to get acceptance and approval and avoid rejection from other people, the more inevitable that the balloon is going to burst. Before I go into the 5 examples of what we do, the behaviors that we have when we're trying to gain acceptance, I want to shed a little bit of light on why we have this intense need for acceptance and approval. And that stems from the subconscious mind. Our needs are stored in the subconscious mind. Our beliefs are stored there. The labels and stories that we talked about yesterday are stored in the subconscious mind, and they create the behaviors that we have. So if we go back to caveman, cavewoman days, we can see where this need came from for acceptance. Because if you were especially a cave woman and you were thrown out of the tribe, you might not have survived. And so that need for acceptance, that need for belonging, is actually stored in our DNA. It's conditioned in to act in ways that create acceptance for ourselves. So a lot of our people-pleasing behaviors come from this need, not from something that you're doing consciously. Also, it was conditioned into us when we were kids to do certain things in order to be accepted and approved of. So we have all of this conditioning that is working against us when it comes to letting go of these people-pleasing behaviors. Also, as humans, our desire is to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And it is painful to be rejected. And it feels good to be approved of and accepted. So we seek that and avoid the pain. Let me give you the 5 examples of what we do, the behaviors that we have in order to try and be accepted and approved of. And keep in mind that these behaviors have a snowball effect, kind of like adding air into the balloon. There can only be so much air in the balloon before it explodes. As I'm going through these, ask yourself, do I do these things? Do I have the habit of doing this and I don't even think about it? And how is it impacting my life? So the first one is, when we are trying to get accepted, we go to perfectionism. And that can lead to self-judgment and criticism, because if something isn't right, exactly right, we think that we're to blame. So we criticize ourselves and judge ourselves and tell ourselves that we could have done better, we should have done better. If only, it's the woulda, coulda, shoulda thing. And we end up ruminating about these things that we didn't get perfect. And that leads me to number 2. We end up taking the blame for things that didn't go perfectly. And we end up apologizing, over apologizing for everything. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I brought sweet potatoes. I thought that's what you wanted me to bring. You didn't do anything wrong. You understood you were to bring sweet potatoes to the holiday dinner. But as people pleasers, when we are trying to gain acceptance and approval, we take the blame for everything that doesn't go perfectly. The third example that I have for you is what I call the fog. We get into this fog, and that is fear, obligation, and guilt. And we start acting out of those places instead of out of genuine authenticness. We fear we're not going to be accepted, so we change our behaviors, we morph ourselves into what we think the other person wants. We think we're obligated to say yes to everything, and then when we have to say no, or we try to spit out no, we feel so guilty about it. We feel guilty if things go wrong, if they don't go exactly as planned. Because again, we think that we're not going to be accepted, that our approval and not being rejected rests on us showing up as this unflawed person. Can you see how the balloon is like expanding, expanding, expanding the more things we do? So the fourth example I have of what we do to try and gain approval and acceptance is we do one of two things. We either try to control or we play small. We become the peacekeeper and try to manage everything, try to make sure that there's no conflict, or we avoid and we don't speak up. We play small. We become the wallflower and just hide, hoping that everything will go smoothly, and that if I'm not there when the balloon explodes, I'm not the one to blame. The fifth example that I have for you that we do to try and gain acceptance and approval is we accept everything. We tolerate things that you wouldn't want your child to tolerate, or that you would not expect anyone else to tolerate. But we think in order to be approved and accepted and liked, that we have to accept whatever comes our way. This could be toxic behavior. This could be abusive language. This could be physical abuse. But we think because of whatever reason, their family, oh, the friendship is 30 years old, whatever, we think that because of whatever reasoning we have, that we have to accept it. So we allow these energy and time sucks into our life, and they add stress to our life. And again, this just adds to the snowball. And this snowball effect impacts other things in our life, like sleep. It impacts our health. Because we're putting out cortisol so much, because we're stressed, trying to keep the balloon inflated and to keep it from popping, we put out this cortisol, which ends up in women a lot of times in belly fat. All of our relationships are impacted when we are trying to do our best to gain acceptance and approval, not be rejected, and keep that balloon inflated. Now that you know that people pleasing is mainly a survival tool and it was a way for you to gain acceptance and approval, in the next video I'm going to talk about the worst question that we can ask ourselves when we are seeking for acceptance and approval from someone else in our lives. Will drastically reduce stress. Will drastically reduce stress. Subconscious minds may. This is day 3 of the